Hello and welcome to today's edition of Daf Yomi, Daf 27 Omid A of Teruma using Steinsaltz edition. So let's dive straight in. So I'll start from the last paragraph of the previous Daf. Abai said, in response that you find the term in place, tahat is sometimes a term that indicates the association of one sanctity with another, and is sometimes a term that indicates desacralization. And the term that indicates the association of one sanctity with another, as it is written. But if the white leprous spot stays in its place, tertecha, Leviticus 13:23, in this verse the word tertecha indicates that the white leprous spot remains in its place. This usage of the word is fitting for substitution, since when sanctity is transferred by substitution from a consecrated animal to a non-sacred animal, the sanctity of the consecrated animal remains in place, despite the fact that the non-sacred animal is also consecrated. Yet tahat is also a term I've lost it. Tahat is also a term that indicates desacralization, as is written in place of tahat brass I will bring gold, and in place of iron I will bring silver, and in place of wood brass, in place of stones of iron, Isaiah 60:17. In this verse, the had means replacement, which is what occurs in desacralization, where one item is replaced by another. And therefore, the term should be understood in accordance with the context. With regard to animals consecrated for sacrifice upon the altar, which render a non-sacred animal for which they are exchanged as substitute, tahad is a term that indicates the association of one sanctity with another. With regard to animals consecrated for temple maintenance, which do not render a non-sacred animal for which they are exchanged as substitute, tahad is a term that indicates desacralization. The later commentaries ask, since the term tahad sometimes indicates sanctity and sometimes it means desacralization, why not simply ask the owner of the animal about his intention with regard to his statement, rather than determine his intention based on the context? One answer is that the Gemara is discussing a case where the owner of the animal was in fact asked about his intent, and we replied that he had no specific intention in mind, and that's in Fas Emes. However, said, even with regard to animals consecrated for sacrifice upon the altar, which render a non-sacred animal for which they are exchanged as substitute, you can find that tahat is a term that indicates desacralization. For example, in a case where a consecrated animal was blemished, if a consecrated animal was blemished, and a non-sacred animal was standing before the owner, and he said, this animal is desacralized, the sanctity transferred to that animal, the consecrated animal is desacralized. This halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rava. That's the Rambam Sefer Hilchos Arichos V'Rachamim 7:9, and can be desacralized because it is unfit to be sacrificed. And one placed that consecrated animal next to a non-sacred animal and said, this animal is in place of tahat, that animal. Although the blemished sacred animal can render a non-sacred animal for which it is exchanged consecrated as a substitute, in this context the term tahat means desacralization. Rabbi Asi said, even in the case of a blemished animal mentioned by Rava, sometimes you find that tahat is a term that indicates desacralization, and sometimes you find that tahat is a term that indicates that the association of one sanctity with another. If the owner's hand is resting on the consecrated animal, what's the footnote? In a case where a blemished consecrated animal and a non-sacred animal are standing before the owner, if his hand was placed on the non-sacred animal and he said, this animal is in place of that animal, and the non-sacred animal is consecrated as a substitute, the owner of the animal is flogged. If the owner's hand was placed on the consecrated animal and he said, this animal is in place of that animal, the non-sacred animal is not consecrated as a substitute. Rather, the consecrated animal is desacralized with its sanctity transferred to a non-sacred animal, and he has redeemed the blemished animal with the non-sacred animal. This halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rashi. And he says, the animal in place of tahat that animal, this is a term of desacralization. As the placement of his hand indicates that his intention is to sacralize the consecrated animal with his sanctity transferred to that non-sacred animal. If the owner's hand is resting on the non-sacred animal and he says, this animal in place of that animal, that is a term of substitution, as the placement of his hand indicates that his intention is for the non-sacred animal to be consecrated with the same sanctity as the consecrated animal. Abai raises a dilemma. If they were standing before two sacrificial animals, Rashi points out that Abai could have posed this dilemma with regard to a consecrated animal and a non-sacred animal. Well, he chose the case of two consecrated animals and two non-sacred animals in anticipation of the subsequent dilemma. which required 2 consecrated animals and 2 non-sacred animals that were blemished, and 2 non-sacred animals that were unblemished. And without placing his hands on any animal, he says, these animals are thereby in place to have those animals. What is halacha? The Gemara explains the dynamic. Did he say Atachas as associations, i.e., to consecrate the 2 non-sacred animals as substitutes, and therefore he is flogged 2 sets of lashes for the 2 violations of the prohibition against consecrating an animal as a substitute? Or perhaps does one say that since anywhere that there exists both a permitted and prohibited manner to perform an action, a person does not cast aside the permitted manner and perform the prohibition? If so, here too his intention was to desacralize the 2 blemished animals, and therefore he is not flogged. And if you say that anywhere that there exists both a permitted and a prohibited manner to perform an action, a person does not cast aside the permitted manner to perform the prohibition. In the case where they were standing before him 2 sacrificial animals, if there were 2 sacrificial animals, one of which was blemished and the other unblemished, and 2 non-sacred animals, one of which was blemished and the other unblemished, standing before the owner, and he said, these animals are hereby in place of those animals, the unblemished consecrated animal, and the unblemished non-sacred animal consecrated as a substitute. Since an established principle that anywhere that there exists both a permitted and prohibited manner to perform an act, a person does not perform the prohibition, the blemished animal is desacralized, with its sound transferred to the blemished non-sacred animal, and therefore he is flogged only 1 set of lashes. As usual, the Rambam rules in accordance with the proposed resolution of each dilemma introduced by the phrase, and if you say, Rambam Sefer Kabbalah, Hilchot Teruma 2:3, see the Kesef Mishnah there. One of which was blemished, and one of which was unblemished, and 2 non-sacred animals, one of which was blemished, and one of which was unblemished. And he said, these animals are thereby in place of those animals. What is halacha? Although we certainly intended to transfer the sanctity of the unblemished sacrificial animal to a non-sacred animal by substitution, it's unclear which of the 2 non-sacred animals he intended to consecrate as a substitute. Once again, the Gemara explains the dilemma. Did he intend to say that the unblemished non-sacred animal should be consecrated as a substitute in place of the unblemished consecrated animal? And with regard to this pairing, he intended to associate the sanctity by substitution, while the blemished non-sacred animal should be consecrated in place of the blemished consecrated animal. And for this pairing, he intended to desacralize the consecrated animal. If so, he is flogged only for the first pairing and not for the second pairing. Or perhaps he intended that the unblemished non-sacred animal should be consecrated as a substitute in place of the blemished consecrated animal. And the blemished non-sacred animal should be consecrated as a substitute in place of the unblemished consecrated animal. And since he intended to perform substitution in both cases, he is flogged for both pairings. And if you say that anywhere that there exists both a permitted and a prohibited manner to perform an action, one does not perform the prohibition, this would resolve the previous dilemma, as his intention must have been to desacralize the blemished consecrated animal, and therefore he is not flogged 2 sets of lashes. One creates the following dilemma, in which case, in a case where there were 3 sacrificial animals before him, there were 3 sacrificial animals before him, etc. If there were 3 sacrificial animals, of which one was blemished and the other 2 unblemished, and 3 non-sacred animals, all of which were unblemished, standing before the owner, and he said, these animals are hereby in place of those animals. The 2 unblemished consecrated animals render the 2 unblemished sacred animals consecrated as substitutes. The blemished consecrated animal is desacralized, with its sanctity transferred to the 3rd unblemished non-sacred animal, and therefore he is flogged with only 2 sets of lashes. The Rambam rules in accordance with the proposed resolution of each dilemma introduced by the phrase, if you say. So the Rambam Sefer Kabbalah, Hilchot Teruma 2:3, see the Kesef Mishnah there. One of which was blemished, while the other 2 were unblemished, and 3 non-sacred animals, all of which were unblemished. And he said, these animals are hereby in place of tachat those animals. What is halacha? The Gemara explains the dilemma. Do we say that since he intended for the unblemished non-sacred animals to be consecrated as substitutes in the place of unblemished consecrated animals, i.e. to associate the sanctity, so too he intended to consecrate the unblemished non-sacred animal as a substitute in place of the blemished consecrated animal, i.e. to associate its sanctity, and therefore he is flogged 3 sets of lashes. Or perhaps here too applies the principle that anywhere that exists both a permitted and a prohibited manner to perform an action, a person does not perform the prohibition. If so, his intention with regard to this That's the blemish consecrated animal was to desacralize it, and therefore he is not flogged for transferring a sanctity to a substitute. And if you say that here too, since this man has not yet been established as one who regularly transgresses a prohibition until he has done so 3 times, therefore it is assumed that he does not cast aside the permitted manner and perform the prohibition. Rashi therefore raises the following dilemma: if there were 4 sacrificial animals standing before him, one of which was blemished, and the other 3 were unblemished, and 4 non-sacred animals, all of which were unblemished, and he said these animals are hibah in place of those animals, was Allah. Again, the Gemara clarifies the dilemma. Here, since it is certain that he intended for 3 unblemished non-sacred animals to be consecrated as substitutes in place of the 3 unblemished consecrated animals, this man has been established as one who regularly transgresses a prohibition. Therefore, it is assumed that he also intended for one of the unblemished non-sacred animals to be consecrated as a substitute in place of the blemished consecrated animal, which means he is liable to be flogged 4 sets of lashes for the 4 substitutions. Or perhaps, even though in this case he has been established as one who transgresses the prohibition, nevertheless, even such a person does not cast aside the permitted manner and perform the prohibition. And if so, his intention with regard to this last blemished animal was to desacralize it. The Gemara concludes that all of these dilemmas shall stand unresolved. The Mishnah teaches, if the consecrated animal was blemished, and he said this consecrated animal is desacralized, with sanctity transferred to that non-sacred animal, the consecrated animal is desacralized. The owner is required to conduct an appraisal to ascertain the relative values of the 2 animals. If the consecrated animal is worth more than the non-sacred animal, he must pay the difference to the temple treasury. Rabbi Yochanan says, the consecrated animal is desacralized by Torah even if the consecrated animal is worth 100 dinars, and the non-sacred animal is worth only 1 putta. But by rabbinic law, the owner is required to conduct an appraisal to ascertain the relative value. What does that mean? With regard to any consecrated animal that develops a blemish, whether it belongs to the temple maintenance or is an offering to be sacrificed upon the altar, one may desacralize it, with its sanctity transferred to an animal of equal value of abnisho. In a case where one transgress and desacralize it only onto an animal of lesser value, even if the consecrated animal is worth 100 dinars and the non-sacred animal is worth only 1 putza, the consecrated animal is desacralized, and one may derive benefit from that animal. By rabbinic law, the owner is required to conduct an appraisal to ascertain the relative value of the 2 animals, and if the consecrated animal is worth more than the non-sacred animal, he must pay the difference to the temple treasury house. So, in a case where a person owned 2 animals, a consecrated animal was worth 10 dinars and developed a blemish, and the non-sacred animal was worth 5 dinars, maybe he said his consecrated animal is desacralized with its sanctity transferred to that non-sacred animal. The consecrated animal is desacralized, but he must pay 5 dinars to the temple treasury, as stated in the Mishnah of Sefer Flora, 7, 8 to 9, the 2 animals, and to pay the difference to the temple treasury, so that the temple treasury not suffer loss. And Reish Lakish says, even the requirement to conduct an appraisal to ascertain the relevant value of the 2 animals to pay the difference to the temple treasury applies by Torah law. What are we dealing with here? What is the case that is subject to the disagreement between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish? If we say that they disagree in a case where the difference in value between 2 animals is worth exactly 1/6, what is the difference in value that constitutes exploitation by Torah law? Or not exploitation? Exploitation occurs any time an item is sold for more or less than market value without deceit or error in measurement. If the exploitation constituted a deviation of less than 1/6 from the market value, the same is valid and no money is returned, as the overpayment or underpayment is considered to be forgiven. If the exploitation was a deviation of exactly 1/6 from the market value, the same is valid, but the difference in value must be returned. If the exploitation constitutes a deviation of more than 1/6 from the market value, the transaction is void. Slave documents, land, and consecrated properties. Consecrated property are not subject to the law of exploitation. Why Reish Lakish say that one must repay the difference in value between the 2 animals to the temple treasury by Torah law. Well, the Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish disagree with regard to a case of notification of a transaction, i.e. whether the difference in value between the animals was greater than 1/6. Would Rabbi Yochanan say that in such a case one is required to conduct an appraisal to ascertain the relative value of the 2 animals by rabbinic law? That's the end of the Omen. Wish you a very good day and peace in Israel. All the best. Bye.